As we've said, neither of the senators who were speaking out against President Trump today are running for re-election. But earlier this afternoon, I spoke to a Republican senator who is still on the ballot next year and who is potentially facing a primary challenge of his own. It's Republican Senator Roger Wicker of Mississippi. Well, let me say this. I get the sense that this divide is less about policy and more about style, pugilism, whatever you want to call it. I mean, because I'm old enough to remember when Jeff Flake was the conservative in any race that he would get involved in. And when every conservative, truly conservative groups that, you know these groups well, whether it's Club for Growth, who, you know, Jeff Flake was a guy that if he got criticism from Washington, it was because they thought he was being too stubborn on fiscal issues. You know, not a team player enough, but from the right. So this is not about ideology, it's about character. Does the president's character bother you?
Well, for one thing, I think Jeff Flake has always been a strong conservative and still is. You mentioned a divide, and Chuck, I would just have to say there's not much of a divide in the Republican conference in the United States Senate. We have our eyes on some pretty big achievements. And as a matter of fact, the president talked about them today. There's a popular misconception that this 9 months of the Trump administration hasn't accomplished much with this Republican majority, and he went chapter and verse to sort of celebrate the things that we have been able to do. Right. And so I would challenge the premise of your question that there is a divide. Certainly there have been 2 or 3 people who've been outspoken in our conference, but that luncheon today was comprised of a bunch of allies who are trying to move us in a better direction for the United States and who appreciate the president's leadership.
So does the president's character, because this is what is obviously the issue for Senators Flake and Corker, does his character bother you? Does it bother you the way the president conducts himself in office? This is not about policy positions. I think it's pretty clear this is about character. Well,
okay, you have characterized their statements as dealing with the president's character. I wouldn't do that. Again, I'm at a disadvantage because I haven't read the book. I've only read excerpts of it, and I don't know what the speech today said. But I think most of us in the conference are very comfortable with the direction that this chief executive of our nation and this head of our party wants to take us. We need to tackle tax reform, and then we need to get back to repealing and replacing Obamacare, and we need to put some more judges on the bench and get the president's team in place. And I think 95% of us are united on that.
It's interesting, the way you framed Senator Jeff Flake, you said he should have known the backlash to his book. Do you feel like you have to tiptoe?
I think he probably did.
Do you have to tip? I guess my question is, do you feel like you have to tiptoe around the president? You have to be careful how you criticize him because you're afraid of what he might do on Twitter?
No. The answer to that is no.
So what do you seem to say that it was Flake that provoked him.
Well, okay. Jeff wrote a book. He didn't even tell his staff he was doing it. Mm-hmm. It was quite provocative based on the excerpts and the news articles I've seen about it. And he obviously knew that this was going to be a bombshell. I mean,
but you don't think the president has played a role in this? You don't think the president has played a role in this? Do you think it was necessary the president didn't take the high road with Bob Corker today?
I don't know what exchanges took place today after the lunch on Bob Corker. I will say this. I do not see how this chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee thinks this exchange is helpful to American foreign policy. And I haven't asked Bob about that, but if he had asked me my advice, I would have counseled against getting into this sort of spitting contest.
Is it going to be hard for you to explain to constituents why Bob Corker keeps his committee chairmanship, why John McCain, who's been critical, keeps his? Do you think that should be a litmus test? That if you get into, at some point, should there be a litmus test when it comes to a committee chairmanship?
Chuck, I don't think that's being discussed. Okay. It may be a question being asked by the press and by some of the blogs, but we don't operate as a dictatorship. In the Republican conference, and I really have not heard that discussed among members.
And when your name comes up for primary challenges, one of the things that people remind, I think some of your staff is reminded, you have voted with the president I'm going to say 94, 95% of the time. I don't have the exact figure in front of me.
I think it's 95.9.
Oh, fair enough, 95.9 to be exact. But let me ask you this. Chris McDaniel, who may challenge you in a primary, he would say your fireable offense is sticking by Mitch McConnell. How would you answer that question?
Well, I would say I'm going to run hard for re-election, as I always have. I'm going to run on my accomplishments, which are numerous, and we're going to take the race seriously, but we're prepared to run, and if we have a general election or a primary opponent, I'm going to make the case as I always have done.
And where are you on Mitch McConnell? Do you think he should stay as leader?
Yes, I do. And as a matter of fact, the president today went chapter and verse about the numbers of ways that the leader had helped the president, helped his team, helped his agenda, not the least of which is the way we were absolute stalwarts during 2016 on the Supreme Court issue, and actually made the presidential election about the direction of the Supreme Court for the next generation. I think you can look at that leadership, and I was glad to be part of it.
Right.
And you could say that Neil Gorsuch is a member of the Supreme Court now because of the team that we put together and the fact that we were steadfast in refusing to take up President Obama's nominee.
And I know the president called you, among a couple other senators, to reassure you that if Steve Bannon wants to run against you, are you confident President Trump is going to support you no matter who runs against you?
I would sure hope so, and of course that's been reported. I declined to comment to the press about any phone call, but let me just say I do support the president's program, and I have the votes to prove it, and I would certainly welcome his support and suggestions and good wishes as I run for re-election.
Senator Roger Wicker, Republican from Mississippi. I will leave it there, sir. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.